This question's to the Prime Minister and asks...
It's a pleasure, sir.
Does he stand by all his statements? If so, how?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Right Honourable Winston.
If there's, to quote him, nothing new, end of quotes, regarding footage taken of Pike River Mine from Borehole 44, showing intact wooden pallets and rubber hoses a month after the explosions, why did the Prime Minister and his colleagues tell the families that there is nothing but ashes and dust down there?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member is incorrect in his assertion about what may have been said to the families. But more importantly, the issue of what happened in the mine, was dealt with in great depth by the Royal Commission. The member is trying to portray the issue of what happened to the mine as a product of political opinion. It isn't. It's been investigated in detail by a Royal Commission with all the powers of a Royal Commission to inquire after any evidence that it wanted to see, and that has been fully and publicly reported on.
Prime Minister, can I ask, before making a statement, does he check all the facts? If not, why not?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, to the best of my ability, but as I pointed out to the member yesterday, I'm often asked about topics where there has not been that opportunity, and I try and check the facts as soon as I can and say at the time that I'm going to do that.
Supplementary question. Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If there are certainly problems, using his quote, if, quote him, there are certainly problems with Fuji Xerox, in the quotes, his words, then what investigations is he ordering into Peter Thomas, the former head of all of government procurement at MB, who jumped ship to Fuji Xerox in 2015 and secured contracts for the government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm advised by my colleague there was a thorough investigation of that and no issues came to light. But of course, if there was any new evidence of anything that looked like inappropriate or certainly fraudulent behaviour, then of course government would investigate it, or the appropriate agency would investigate it.
Where we learned overnight that money can buy citizenship, whether one intends to live in New Zealand or not. Where you can claim to be an investor, put in $7 million into a joint government fund, and when you pull your money, you make $23 million, the government makes nothing, and you don't pay any tax, but you're meant to be a great investor for our country. How does this work? And they've done it over and over and over again. We've been a very powerless state where offshore money can buy critical land and resources, whether disadvantaged New Zealand or not. This man, Thiel, got a 30 million high country farm up against all the rest of the world because he didn't have to face the rest of the world. He got it because, and without the Overseas Investment Office scrutiny, because he was able to claim, I am a New Zealander. And he lived here for 12 days. 12 days. Everybody else had to live here for 1,350 days, even to make the application. So why would he be different? Now they say it's because he's a mate of Donald Trump's. Problem is, back in 2011, no one had heard of Donald Trump standing for America. So that can't be true, can it? And if he's a mate of Donald Trump at the last election in America, well, the National Party in 2016 was backing Hillary Clinton. So that can't be true either, can it? Just one lie after the other.
All right. On Peter Thiel, 12 days and made a citizen. It looks like he bought his way into New Zealand, doesn't it?
Well, look, that's a misleading impression of what happened. He actually was already a New Zealand resident, granted residency in 2006, I think, by the previous government. So he didn't just turn up at the airport and become a citizen. There's a discretionary process. The officials make recommendations. As I understand, there's 700 or 800 people get citizenship by this process every year. So the minister used his discretion. I think we need to remember the context at the time. New Zealand was coming out of recession.
Well, how does Peter Thiel help with that?
looking for flows of capital, things that might help us get ahead. We're quite happy with the fact that Peter Thiel's a citizen.
He wouldn't have got citizenship, though, would he, if it wasn't for his wealth?
Well, if he wasn't an investor, that probably would have made a difference. I mean, you'd need to look at the official advice about that.
But he wants citizenship to. Well, why do you think he wants citizenship? I've got an idea about why he might want it, but what do you think?
Look, I don't know what his particular reasons were. We find more and more people want to be citizens of a stable, safe, credible country. New Zealand's profile is rising around the world. That's a good thing.
Well, he had permanent residency. So he could come here whenever he wanted. He could live here for as long as he wanted, right?
Well, and you're best to ask him about why he wanted to change that status.
But it allows you to buy anything you like without scrutiny from the Overseas Investment Office, doesn't it? That's a point of fact, isn't it? If you're a New Zealand citizen, you can buy what you like without scrutiny from the Overseas Investment Office.
That may well be the case. I don't know if that was his motivation.
No, but that is true, isn't it?
Well, he had to be. I mean, if the implication is that there's some kind of secret of transactions or whatever, that would be wrong.
No, it just allows you far greater discretion about what you own, buy, and acquire in New Zealand, doesn't it? If you're a New Zealand citizen.
Well, fundamentally, it just means if you buy land, then it doesn't need to go through the provisions of the Overseas Investment Act.
Perception-wise, though, do you think it's a good look to be granting New Zealand citizenship to a person with such a fleeting interest in New Zealand? I heard Peter Dunn over the weekend, who's had ministerial positions in this kind of area before, saying he wouldn't have granted him citizenship.
Well, look, I think it would be. I think you'd have to say he's got more than a fleeting interest in New Zealand. I mean, he's been a resident. He made a resident 11 years ago. Citizen 5 or 6 years ago.
But 12 days. 12 days in New Zealand, though.
Well, he was already a resident. I mean, it's simply wrong to characterise it as a guy showing up at the airport becoming a citizen.
No, I'm just giving you the facts that you reluctantly released. It was 12 days. 12 days in New Zealand. I mean, that's fleeting, isn't it?
You didn't give the fact that he was a resident since 2006. Look,
what does resident mean? Because I know what it means to me. It means I live somewhere.
Yeah, well, what
does it mean to you?
These are our laws for how you qualify for residency or citizenship. We're quite happy. Look, some people don't like the guy or disagree with him. Yeah. We're quite happy with his contribution. He's particularly in our tech sector got a set of relationships with the US tech sector, which I am told have been very useful for the development of what's now one of our faster growing export sectors.
Yeah, for sure.
These are good things. These are good things.
For sure. But is it an ongoing and enduring interest, or did he get the stamp, get the passport and lose interest in us?
Well, I hope it's an ongoing and enduring interest. Because we could continue to benefit as a country from that kind of connection.
And do you have any evidence that it is? I mean, is he a guy that you've stayed in touch with?
I think I may have met him once in my office a number of years ago, but we don't track citizens to make sure that they're behaving correctly. I mean, he's a citizen of New Zealand. He has the same rights as everybody else.
Yeah. So no regrets about offering him citizenship at all?
No, I don't think so. I think, and particularly in the context in which it was granted, where New Zealand was getting on its feet again, I think a more useful contribution.
All right.
I mean, Palantir was just Peter Thiel and Alex basically meeting with me and saying, we got these algorithms on fraudulent transactions. We think there might be some value for the intelligence community. We brainstormed. They came back, and I kind of said on the blackboard, it needs to kind of look like this. The team went away and did a mock-up in 2 weeks, and then immediately we took that team and put them inside the building to work on what we call a CT counter-terrorist problem. And they just learned that business, and that became Palantir, and Palantir is worth somewhere between $10 or $20 billion today. Because the counter-terrorist problem is the same problems that banks have in fraudulent transactions and any other kind of fraudulent transaction. We were at the West Coast Computer Fair in 1978, and all my non-Asian frat brothers decided to go have lunch. So we're sitting there, and this group of contingents of Japanese executives show up, thinking that we were Japanese Americans. We didn't want to tell them we were not, but so we kind of faked it. And then they say, hey, we're looking for developers to develop software for a new computer that we're planning to launch in Japan. And it turned out that group of Chinese executives came from a company called ASCII Microsoft of Japan. And I got my first contracts to actually develop games for the Japanese Microsoft standard called the MSX.
Another hit game that was developed was Tetris, which you first licensed from its Soviet creator in 1987.
Yeah.
Were there some negotiations with the Soviet government as well on that, or
dealing with the Russians?
You know, this class is Silicon Valley and the U.S. government, so government.
The difference between negotiating the rights for Tetris is not that different than negotiating a nuclear disarmament treaty with them. Right? It's kind of really interesting. You know, what happened to us was this. We were sitting around at the Consumer Electronics Show, and typically you have these guys who scurry around looking for interesting games from abroad and try to get the rights and then license them into the US by selling it to a game publisher. And so they showed us this game, and it was Tetris, and I loved it. I said, this is great. And the agent was saying, hey, look, everybody's turned down this game because, you know, Brother Bun turned down the game, EA turned down the game, Sega turned down the game because, you know, it was a stupid game, right? The graphics were awful, nobody dies, you know, bad sound, right? And I kind of go, yeah, but it's really addicting. I really kind of like this game. And I said, but I want to make some changes. I need to talk to the programmers. And the agent kind of looks at me, he goes, well, we got a problem here. I go, what's the problem? He goes, well, the programmers are in the Soviet Union. So I turned to my partner, Phil Adams. I said, get the rights. Put it in a red box with a hammer and sickle and get it out in the next 6 months, because I had heard through the rumor mill that there was going to be the very first set of talks between the Soviet Union and the US, and it would be between Reagan and Gorbachev. So I said, get the game rights, right? And if this thing actually comes to you, we're going to launch the game during the talks. And that's what we did, right? We launched the game during the talks. We even hired a fake Gorbachev and a fake Ronald Reagan lookalike. And we were running ads in the USA Today that says, you know, because there'll be the headlines, you know, Gorbachev meets with Reagan, going through all the issues around nuclear proliferation. And then on, you know, the back of the page will be our ad with the fake Reagan and Gorbachev saying what they were really doing during the secret summits. They were playing Tetris, right? But it got ugly. The game became a hit, and I had met a friend in Japan, and he wanted to license it to the Japanese. And I came back, and there's a whole story. You can buy several books on this. You know, the rights got confused, and so the Russians decided that there was going to be a lot of money into this thing. And because Nintendo wanted it for the Game Boy. And my parent company at that time, we were owned by the Maxwell Corporation. And my not particularly smart sister company in England decided to trade the rights of Tetris for Blasteroids. Like, who cares about Blasteroids? It's an awful game. So what they did was they renegotiated the rights in Japan and then went back to Russia and get the Russians to say that the original contract was void, and which would allow them to get the rights directly to Nintendo, right? And basically null and voiding the original contract that we have, because their claim was the agency that we were dealing with didn't have the rights to negotiate it, and they were kind of making up the rules as they went along. I mean, it all worked out in the end because at least I got my rights protected. Because it was, again, the Japanese were good to me, but the other guys got all cut out. Atari got cut out, and the game became a big hit. And the reason why it became a big hit was because it was the first game to ship packed in with the first generation Game Boy. In fact, there's some pictures of Hillary Clinton playing Tetris. She was a hardcore Tetris player. You know, she had her own Game Boy, and she would endlessly play it. So there's actually a picture, you look it up on the internet, for playing on a Game Boy on an airplane playing Tetris. But